Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello, this is Sue Rose Minahan, and tonight is May 23rd, 2020, and we're repeating this on Thursday morning at 6 a.m. Pacific time on May 28th. We're in the Gemini archetype, meaning that the sun has entered Gemini, and we have a new moon as of yesterday, and a new moon is that time that seeds every month as it connects with the sun and the moon go together, and it's an energetic power of, in this case, great communication. And we have eclipses because and this is all, there's astronomical reasons for all of this, but we have an hour and we'll certainly discuss that in many frameworks. But the point is that with nodal points, and that's the pathway between the moon and the sun, these points change every 18 months, and when the new moons connect at that point, we have eclipses somewhere on Earth, and we're entering that period where we're going to have a lunar eclipse on the 5th of June, and then a solar eclipse 2 weeks later, and then another lunar eclipse or solar eclipse after that. At any rate, we're in a whole season of it. And Gemini itself is communication, and it's many directions. So I do apologize. I seem to be catering to some of that energy myself. And as we will discuss tonight, as we have the Moonbeam Team, Neptune, the great planet of the unknown, of most consciousness, is intention. So intention, not I-N, but with a gap there, meaning that there's a lot of activity to connect with everything. So it'll be most exciting between these dynamics that we're experiencing. And one thing I do want to mention with these nodes, the South Node is a fire, instinctive, truth-bearing energy of Sagittarius, and the North Node is ruled by Mercury, of communication, intellect between spirit and matter. So we have perhaps the struggles and challenges in many dimensions coming up for the 18 months that this period of nodal activity is, between the intellect coaching, you might say, our instinctive energies of intuition. So I think my panel will have some more clarity with me, and now it's time for the Moonbeam Team.
Relating to the sun and moon's energies, including the planets and the entire cosmos for the month's systematic 2-week intervals of the new moon and full moon, plus the annual 4 to 5 eclipses, this is your Moonbeam Team.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, certified astrologer, sacred healing counselor, tarotist, and numerologist, providing individual consultations, teaching and tutoring internationally, co-author of Gateways to Change, Keys to Navigating the Seas of Life, currently facilitating workshops in Marysville and Camano Island, Washington.
And I'm Sara Stromley, a craniosacral therapist and founder of Brain Body Therapy in Kirkland, Washington, I'm an evolutionary astrologer that incorporates different forms of horary, location mapping, and medical astrology into my practice. I enjoy uncovering flower and mineral frequencies that also support the mind-body coherence that aid in the healing journey.
And as Albert Einstein said, energy is never destroyed. Energy only changes. Yes. And myself, Sue Rose Minahan, to begin this particular panel or team every session, we each come up with one of our highlights that we think is important. And I am going to present the fact that we are in this movie of life right now, and that part of it is shielding our boundaries. That really, as we navigate between voicing our energies and coming into contact with other people's ideas and new information, that we're really in this reflective time of expression and reflecting. So with that, Sara, what would you want to add?
I just think this is a time of abundant ideas, and there's this stirring of urgency to act and considerations for the perception of missed opportunities or missing opportunities, and a strong desire to connect with others and connect with something big.
Oh boy, you do say it well. That's good. And Liz, how would you want to continue with this?
Well, keep breathing as you allow the inner reflection to take place. Be gentle with yourself because there's lots of change happening. We're kind of in a hurry to want to do things, but it's like allow that maybe the schedule won't go according to plan.
Well, let's talk about these charts, because this is focus really on these two energies, the new moon, which was yesterday, and that would be May 22nd, and here on the West Coast and Pacific time, that's at 10:39 a.m. And on the East Coast, it's 12:12 colon 14 seconds, if you want to add that. So, excuse me. No, that's wrong. That's, boy, I am not doing so well tonight. That happened to be the second chart that I was talking about. That would be on June 5th. Well, let's stick with this one. May 22nd. Okay, it's 10:39 a.m. or 1 p.m. That's 1:39 p.m. here. That's Eastern time. Yes, so I think we all have that. And it just seems that one of the major issues is this sense of reclaiming and reviewing with Venus going retrograde, which is apparent, and in over the next since May 13th until the 25th. And just to remind people, we're the three of us are not sitting in the same room, and I have very conscientious panel members, so they wait for me, and we don't have that eye contact. So lead on, folks. Yeah.
Well, last week we had Venus go retrograde, and Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto was retrograde the end of the month before. So it's like now we have quite a few planets that have gone retrograde, but this new moon in Mercury is about setting our attention. So especially this month, write it down.
Boy, that's true. And when you mention those planets, it's just that those have a lot to do with the big view of things with Jupiter, and our structures of Saturn, and our transformation of Pluto, and then our values and self-reliance and relationships of Venus. So it's the whole ball of wax. Yes, Sara.
Yeah, I would totally concur with Liz's suggestion to write things down, because there is just so many things bouncing around with all this like mercurial, fast-paced mental Gemini energy. The sun moon square that really jumps out to me. There seems to be some difficulty in recognizing and registering all the sensitivities and needs with the dynamic relating scenarios, and with all the Mercury Venus
And
square.
which square?
Yeah, well, we'll get into
which square. Yeah, just
the,
for people on the other side listening. Yeah.
okay, so that was the Sun, Moon square to Mars.
Okay, our actions.
And then
Or-
and then there's what I was about to mention was the Mercury Venus square to Neptune, which is exact. A possible tendency to say too much, and this is for we're talking to, again, the Sagittarius full or new moon, or the Gemini new moon. Sorry, the Gemini new moon is what I'm referencing here.
Yeah,
so there's just a possible tendency to say too much, but it's also a great time to recognize limitations and pursue studies and intellectual activities and inspiration.
Isn't it true? And that action, we want to go forward, but since Mars, our action planet, is in Pisces, which is swimming in the sea, there's all kinds of ways to go, and it is a different tempo. It's really not the same tempo. It wants to think of things more in a poetical or musical or spiritual way, which I think both of those are emphasizing, to open up rather than the linear way of always doing things.
Well, and having those squares, it's possible we just don't have all the information. We might have 80 or 90% of it, but there could be just a small piece missing.
And that is often the case when we are retracing our steps, such as when we speak retrograde, trying to decipher this to the listeners' database of thinking, is that retrograde means we're retracing some degrees. They literally, from our view here on Earth, appear to be going backwards in their orbit. I mean, if we could trace them, like if you were looking up at the sky, one day you'd see it kind of moving in the other direction, like, gee, it just went in that direction. And they do this every year, although Venus only does it a year and a half, so that's pretty unusual. So yes, we're really redigesting, reconsidering.
And gathering more information. And I heard the other day on the news of how people are doing the old-fashioned way of communication of writing a card or a letter and sending it to somebody, and possibly even sending it to some older people that you may know, because some of the older generation isn't computer savvy. So I think that they would really appreciate a handwritten letter.
Yes, I saw that in the newspaper here in Seattle, Washington. It says letter drive. Let seniors in isolation know they're not alone. And I thought, how wonderful. It's a big hobby of mine. I love writing letters. Yes, Sarah.
Also that new moon in Gemini, it's got this trine. It's a separating trine to Saturn. So there is still, it's an orb though, that there is a great way of connecting with our elders, as well as that supports that, as well as maybe seeking favor from our superiors. And, asking for something you've been wanting to ask for.
There does seem to me to be an intergenerational energy that I've noticed since the beginning of this whole coronavirus. And I suppose in a way it has to do, when I think about it astrologically, I can't remember all the details, but looking just right now, of course, Saturn, the planet of authority, is one way of describing it, is in that not adventurous, but in that groundbreaking Aquarius, that it's going back. So it is interesting that for instance, the elders are learning to use all the new, not that they haven't, but use the internet and the different techniques of, the online Zoom communication, that
the tools that Gemini likes. Gemini likes tools.
Yeah, Gemini and Aquarius, for the internet and everything. Yeah, exactly. But you're right. Gemini does too. But, there has been criticism in the past of maybe isolating behind texting people, but now it's like that's how we're navigating, that's how we're communicating. So that's just one example, but you're right. But going back to that idea of elder and youth, of whatever, however that's measured, that there is this interaction. I think that has a bonus. You were calling it was a sextile. I was just relating back to what, supporting what you were saying there. It's interesting phenomenon.
Trying.
Well, and even pick up the phone and make a phone call and talk, because we're used to sending emails and texts, and not, a great deal of our population, yes, does have computer technology and smartphones and those kind of things, but not everybody does. So, maybe there's a neighbor in your neighborhood that, just is disconnected, and maybe their children live really far away, or they don't even communicate with their children possibly. So, I would think in this time of somewhat isolation and stay at home orders, that for some people that would be, they would be very appreciative of that.
Yeah. It is interesting in the newspaper how so many subjects are focused with this energy of Gemini. Immediately speaking, I just have clipped out countless ones. There's several ones that are presenting the need for strong journalism. And of course, that's publishing, which would be the nodal energy of the South Nova Sag, and the and 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 all this Gemini information. And Annie Glenn, the astronaut's wife of John Glenn, and the senator, that I hadn't realized that she stuttered. And so now isn't that amazing? That's like one factor of Mercury when it's having some real struggles. And it's here in the paper. She just passed. And to remember communicative disorders that she worked greatly for. And in some ways, even if you can speak clearly, being understood and really working to get to bridging beyond those communication barriers, if we could work on that element. And maybe that has something to do with these possible squares that we're talking about. And squares for the population here is 90 degrees. It means just angular friction that wants to get resolved. So it's not a horrible thing. It just needs work. That's all.
Yes, because we have some, comfortable aspects with trines, and we have some, as you say, friction aspects also. So it's a combination. And with the retrograde Venus in Gemini, that Gemini energy, usually it's, pretty outgoing, but it's pulling back a little bit, I would say. But it's, I know people are getting out and gardening and stuff. So they're starting to get out and take more walks and those kind of things, be in their community.
Yeah, that's very, garden is certainly Gemini. I mean, garden is definitely Venus. I'm staring at both of these in the chart. Yeah. Sarah, I heard you begin to say something.
Well, I always like to send a blessing to the body part on a new moon or around a new moon for the body part that rules the astrological sign. And for Gemini, it's the hands, the lungs, and all the connectors in the body, even the throat, the things that pass the air, passing liquids, passing messages, the arteries that carry blood, nerves, capillaries that carry signals, that support our spatial awareness, pressure, coordination, all that. So
that's a very good reminder. We are talking about a new moon seed energy. This is very true.
And you would know, like when you lose the capacity to use your hands, Sue can tell you how difficult that can be.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
A year ago, yes, when I had that accident. It's true. Yeah. I'm glad. And even the neck can be a connector. That's true too. It's really
the throat. Yeah, it's the throat is actually ruled by.
And learning is really, I think, such a emphasis with this new moon too, because, for instance, with obviously a lot of parents are really going through a lot of challenges now, trying to direct their children with learning. And although it's online and schools are doing the best they can, but still. And then for those that have special needs of learning capacities. So I suppose that could be incorporated in some of this struggle of breaking down barriers, because that's really what Neptune wants to do, is shift the into more a unified wholeness rather than.
I think there's some great opportunities for people that like connecting with kids and can know the technology to do that and can help with the teaching aspect.
Well, another thing, that's right. There's another article, here I am, where it says that parents are getting people to watch their children online, and that's the older child. It says hire Zoom babysitters so they can children. Right.
But
So
isn't that great?
Yeah, I know. Well, it can't be for too long. I think one of the major factors is that the nodes right now, the south node at 29 degrees Sagittarius, is within close orb. That means energetically just a few degrees. Everything's measured by degrees. There's 30 in a sign, but still that it's towards the galactic center, which is where our Milky Way is part of and spins around this great black hole of the galactic center, which we're still trying to understand, but it is really the source of much consciousness. And so there's certain, I think in a way it's our belief systems of that Sagittarius ideas. I mean, Sagittarius is belief systems, and of course we have them, and that's a glory of life. But on the other hand, they can be limited. They're just built from what information we understand. And this North Node energy with the Venus trying to revalue and the Mercury so exactly conjunct. That's what I think. I don't know if we mentioned that, but they're just exactly at the same degree, just within that degree, is really trying to reevaluate what more about that. If we have it all together as far as what we think the whole energy of higher faith and life is. And perhaps we have a little time here. Maybe we should go into unless you have something you want to add, we could go to this full moon lunar eclipse on June 5th. That's at 12:12 p.m. in Seattle, actually 12:12, 14 seconds on the Pacific coast. And
Liz, do you want to say something to that?
The new moon and the eclipse. Well, eclipse season is coming. The eclipses are here. They're coming. And it's like it changes. There's like lots of shifts and changes. To me, it's like opening a new doorway or a new portal. And this will happen at 15 degrees and 33 minutes of the moon in Sagittarius and the sun in Gemini, because they're opposite of each other. So we still have this Gemini energy continuing on. So that's really exciting. And we still have the square between Venus and the sun now will be square Mars and square the moon. So we have like a T square going on. So a little bit of friction. The sun and moon are opposite. And then Venus is 90 degrees, or Mars is 90 degrees off of that. So, and they're all exact. So that's pretty close at 15 degrees.
Yeah, I think really it spells out that we are desiring actions, and we're toggling between how our whole identity and our values of how it is out in the world with our private emotional ways that build our beliefs of ourself, our belief ideas. And we're wanting to get out into people and figure that out. But it's if everybody's doing this, it has a lot of, well, the Saurus, it has conflict, but I think it's also part of a Saurus
Series. Yeah.
series. Yeah. And that's SAROS, that has to do with the lunar nodes. It's a 1244, that's 1,244 year cycle that starts from one pole up to the next. And there's like 12 or 13 centuries that it goes over, and it connects 70 or 72 times. So it's a long factor that obviously we can't talk totally about now, except just to give you that backdrop. But it's very interesting to see the themes in history and how it might reflect. Because if we look at this just based on what's happening now, of course, we're in coronavirus land. Everybody is navigating the new world that we're wondering what to keep and what to throw out from the past, or what can we keep? What can we salvage? Is like going to the destruction zone and resurfacing things. And if we look at history a little bit, it can tell us that I think a lot of it is internal belief structures with this Saros. And I'm wondering, do we have a break? I think we have a break actually coming up pretty quickly.
Okay.
So maybe with this big intro, we will continue when we get back from the break. And this is the Moonbeam Team in Gemini with Liz Muschett and Sara Stromley and myself on May 23rd. And we're speaking about the Gemini New Moon that was yesterday on the 22nd and the coming up first lunar eclipse that'll be on June 5th. So we'll be right back. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the period of Gemini. By leaving a cycle based on physical form, integrated through spirit, the energy of Gemini connects spirit with matter, focused on communicating and defining the external. Gemini is a mutable air sign signifying flexibility. Gemini dually focuses upon teaching and learning in order to synthesize the world one lives within.
Would you like to re-empower the desires manifesting your dreams? Come ignite your summer solstice eclipse new moon energies in a Talk Cosmos 2-part online workshop event featuring their very own cosmic collaboration panel on Sunday, June 14th from noon to 2 p.m. and navigate your experience during this current Gemini Venus retrograde period while communicating to your deep self your authentic values. And Monday, June 15th from 5 to 7 p.m. with the Moonbeam Team, which includes an experimental ceremonial workshop to release unwanted and worn-out patterns to express the life you desire. To register for this Talk Cosmos online workshop, go to eastwestbookshop.com, click on Online Events, and join Talk Cosmos to redesign your vision.
Hello, universe. This is Catherine Metcalf, professional astrologer, intuitive, and tarot card reader, and you are listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars, hosted by the beautiful Sue Rose Minahan every Saturday from 6 to 7 p.m.
Alternative Talk 1150, the talk of the sound.
We're back, and this is May 23rd, as I was just mentioning before, with this Gemini energy. And we're talking particularly about June 5th, 2020 at 12:12 and 14 seconds on Pacific time, when it's at 15 degrees Sag 34 for those people that want to pull up their charts. And really, what's most interesting on that chart we're looking at is that the rulers it's the energy that's toddling back and forth. I mean, Mars and Neptune are right together, and they are really that energy of the spiritual and in their best way, perhaps, of going forward. Let's see. I think, is it out of bounds? Which one is out of bounds? I think, Liz, you were saying that.
Mercury's out of bounds.
Mm,
Boy, no surprise.
yeah.
That means when it's out of bounds, folks, it means that we gauge things by the ecliptic, and it's just a little bit outside of that path. That's the sun's path, which means it's doing its own thing. It's out there. It doesn't have to listen up to the sun so much.
Well, and I think last week for a few weeks it was Venus and Mars were out of bounds. And so when the planets are out of bounds, they just don't act quite normally. They don't quite go by the rules, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a certain chaos. And I think that's just part of what we were all talking about before. But we were also talking about the history, and I was also thinking about those rulers when I was talking about the rulers, and that was the new moon that we're talking about right now, because really it's one flow of energy, which is always a little bit challenging to present. But it is true. It's like anything. You kind of spring from one that seeds it, and then you enter the next. Here we're initiating our communication that wants everything, chaotic as it is, in order to get to this full moon, which is eclipsing something. And it's actually shutting out some of that moon energy. That's the whole idea of an eclipse, is it shuts out some of the light. It's like a reset button. And if it sets in your particular chart, of course, that's where it has more of the energy. And we were talking about the Saros, Saros, cycles, that long 1,244 year cycle. And this particular one on June 5th is Saros 1, Lunar, Saros 111. And it's at the very end, the 67th of 70. It started, and we happen to notice that both of these eclipses, the one in June, because there will be one, our next talk will be right on the solstice, and for that one, and both of them were in 1389, a long time ago, really, from our thinking, but historically pretty relevant. And
well, this Saros started for 111, started June 10th, 1830, and yeah, it's just interesting how it was also a very similar type of eclipse.
1830, I think that would have been
830 AD.
888. Yes, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah,
830. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, indeed.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. I can mention the research.
Yes.
So there was just looking at that time and that particular, what made historical news was that the relics of Saint Mark were stolen from Alexandria in 1828 to build a rival holy site, and it was a political maneuver used in 830 that launched the world famous tourist destination known as Saint Mark's Basilica in Venice. So Saint Mark is considered to be number 3 in order of significance in the launch of all of Christianity. And St. Mark's Basilica's massive structure includes this spectacular gold and jewel encrusted domes and massive walls and 4 bronze horses that were from Constantinople. But yeah, the Sagittarian, I don't know, a full moon and an eclipse in Sagittarius, it's just, eclipses are like a full moon on steroids. And to me, it's really interesting that the degree is late. The Saros series is late. There's all these things that are kind of pulling together. And when it happens on the south node like this, it's kind of an both at that time, as a political, it was used as a maneuver to usher out what power was at play, both in religion and politics at that time. And then there's kind of a similar, the when a south node eclipse happens, it's more of a theme of what can be released, let go, and it's more supportive of moving away from something.
Yes, integrating the other dimension to integrating. Yes. I'm supporting you. Yes.
And the words of Sagittarius, the most identifying word is I perceive, and it's a very spiritual sign, and the lord of this particular full moon is Jupiter, which rules priests and philosophies and faith and vision. So and I'm not indicating or predicting the end of Catholicism or Christianity by any means, but it seems to be supportive of ushering out limiting beliefs and fixed points of view and expectations and fundamental principles that create judgment and separation.
Yes, I really like how you've laid out the framework, because from my perspective, it really wants us to realize it, because also 29 degrees of Sag of this, the moon is at 15, but meanwhile with it's still referencing that wide energy of the nodes, although it isn't with the nodes, but it's 27 would be the galactic center, but it's asking really in that sense, what is our faith? Because Sagittarius is faith. How much, thinking back to 830 with this looting, you might say, of between these great religions of Christianity and Islam, that really the dynamics of the Ottoman War too back then, later in 1389, which it references, these eclipses, was when the Ottoman Empire really gained its stature, and it went on, the Ottoman power. It's a fascinating part of history all the way until this last century. Actually, its great height was maybe for 200 years or more, but it continued. But in other words, so it's this dynamic between these faiths that keep looting and borrowing and warring. But what I'm getting at is, in reference to what you've offered, is this idea that what is our faith grounded on? It's always this matter of and Gemini supports this too, the matter of physical and the immortal, the spirit, that because by giving such value to like the 4 horses, which really sounds grand, but giving, and it's a third, the Saint Basilica of Mark's, or Mark's Saint Basilica being the third largest, like what we're saying. Yeah, all this emphasis.
Well, as a saint and as a person that founded Christianity.
Yes. Yeah. So perhaps, long story short here, to tie it together is to let go of to review, we're in this process of Venus, to review what is our faith based on? How much do we need to see in order to believe? How much do we need to garner this kind of...
There was 2 other things I was going to mention. The collapse of the Mayan civilization was estimated to be at right around the time of this Saros series start. And
what year was that?
It was, they really only guesstimate it to be between 800 AD to 900 AD.
Yes. Okay.
But there's just not much documented about it. But considering how long they were around and how that eclipse path went over them, that seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, they were a civilization. It's so true, and they lasted a long time. But I couldn't remember go ahead.
And the other thing I was going to mention, if you know anything about Venice and St. Mark's Basilica, you know that it's underwater, and it's a sinking city that's
Mm.
below sea level. And there's these massive infrastructures to keep the water out of this prized historical zone that repeatedly fail. And both the tourism as well as the biggest demographic of patrons that support the upkeep of these jewels are being wiped out from our current pandemic.
Yeah,
So this might be just an interesting thing to watch, as this series continues to come closer and closer to an end.
yeah, there are, for our publics listening, several Saros series going on at the same time. So this is one. They feed from one to the other. But it's so interesting that in 1389, there was also the beginning of the one that is going to be on the solstice. So we'll talk about that at that time.
Yeah.
But it has to do with this battle, I think, between faith and matter, and the veil, in a sense, like what we see, the physical, what is really spirit, what is really these molecules, these dancing energies. Mercury itself, that rules the Gemini, lives in the twilight. Jason Hawley, a wonderful astrologer, gave a great lecture about this energy, because we can only see it during morning or night, but it's right close to the sun. It only stays 28 degrees from the sun, and it sets and rises just before or after. Or if it's right with it, then you can't see it at all. So it's not frequently seen, but it's twilight. And here in the Northwest, we have long twilight sunlight closer to the equator because all of that. Hey, I had forgotten. We usually also include, during this wonderful session monthly, a special energy from both Sara and from Liz. And Sara, you bring out, well, first, maybe we'll do Liz first.
Yeah.
You bring out, okay, Liz, tell us about the degrees of because you do numerology, and Liz has a wonderful book, Gateways of, what is the name of your book? Say that and then tell us your
Gateways to Change, Navigating the Seas of Life Using Numerology and Astrology.
Yes.
So, so for the new moon, it's at 2 degrees and change. So I use the number 3, and the number 3 is about communication and laughter. I think laughter is a really good thing that we need to work and have right now, self-expression, self-improvement, and finding joy in simple pleasures. And then with the full moon, the degree of the sun and the moon is at 15 degrees and change. So I rounded up to number 16, and 16 reduces down to a 7. So we have mental analysis, quiet time, solitude, introspection. And I also wanted to just make another comment about the full moon chart of, we're finding maybe renewing our spiritual connections. We could be merging a couple of different things together, how we're going to do that with partnership, and how we've had stay-at-home orders, so like we're being at home more. How is that working? And merging that with a person's job, or maybe your job has disappeared, and back to relationships, and so how that's all working and merging together.
Boy, that is very powerful. This is so true. And I think that's fascinating. 3, communication. Isn't that extraordinary? I just love, see the connections. I mean, once again, we're doing connections. That's total Gemini. And the oneness, that it all makes sense with this Neptune energy that's squaring. And I'm just repeating this so that people begin to see how it works and how the language works, because words in Gemini is all about language. But communication, the 3, and of course laughter. Even the Bible says that Isaac, the name means laughter, the second name, or the first name of the child, I think it was. So that's amazing. And 7, here we are and analyzing, but you could say with all this retrograde happening, repeat business, we're into the thick of it. It's true. It's part of the process. And with relationships, it's absolutely, because Venus has everything to do with our self and who we relate to. Yeah. And Sara, I mean, if one of you has something else you wanted to comment on, you always bring in about a flower or some energy, since you do tinctures.
Yeah. So the essence that was pulling, especially for this time, and it's also a key ingredient in the moisturizing hand sanitizer I'm selling that you can get through Talk Cosmos if you link to me from their page. It's called Xenon, and it's actually an inert gas elixir, and it's been imprinted with the pressure and signature of this noble gas that's an atomic name labeled as XE, number 54. And xenon is found in only trace amounts in the atmosphere and is used in a number of technological advancements like flash lamps, and the ions were used from this that created the first lasers, and are also used to propel spaceships and absorb nuclear fission. So as an inert elixir, inert gas elixir, and why I believe it was pulling for this particular time is the way it supports the rebalancing of energy at the top of the head, or the crown chakra, as some people call it, which enhances a deeper attunement to the connection of higher thought. And xenon supports an improved sense of life purpose and resourcefulness through these difficult times.
Gee, that's very powerful. I keep thinking of some, not cartoon, but Wonder Woman, Xenon or somebody like that. But that's quite extraordinary. Such energy to add to your sense of protection. If we talk about shields, I think I was mentioning that earlier. The boundaries, Neptune doesn't have any boundaries. It's everywhere. That what you're presenting here is really great on both angles. One is it enters in, it permeates, and the other is it elevates. Spaceships, amazing.
And just that whole sense of life purpose. That's really, and that sense of resourcefulness I think we need. So
yes, and what Sara's referencing to is on Talk Cosmos info at talkcosmos.com. You can certainly inquire, or there too you can actually just go to guests and see Sara and her email and connect with her, or Elizabeth Muschett for that matter too. We are current with the times and do online consultation. I'll have one online fairly soon. And to remind people, we are giving on the 15th a manifesting workshop, and we'll be bringing in the new energies with the solstice from that time forward. So, and that registration is eastwestbookshop.com, online events, which we mentioned earlier. And you can subscribe and find out when we will be talking on the 20th. So it's really, in a nutshell, there isn't such a thing. It's like every nutshell has more seeds. It's so many seeds of thought. I think that's really the energy right now that we're considering. Next week, come to think of it, I need to mention, we do have Cosmic Collaboration Panel, and we'll be talking about the Venus retrograde. No, Venus star point. That's it. Venus star point.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Should have had you guys. Yeah, we could all do it together. Maybe that would be great.
And you're going to be covering that in the workshop, I think, in more detail, aren't you? Or
well, we are indeed. We're actually, this will be Venus star point, which is on June 3rd when the Sun and Venus connect. And then our workshop will be about the Venus retrograde, because that's what we're experiencing. And as we've presented, is directing us to really reflect on what is deep in our heart to really have as values. I think, Liz, you mentioned in the beginning too about the fact that we're toggling. I keep using the word toggling because it seems like that's the case until we integrate it through our relationships with our business and environment of the social and our personal self. Everything is going through such great chaotic shifting. So at any rate, and that'll preface the workshop that the Moonbeam team will be presenting. So we have a few minutes here, and
I just wanted to add a little bit more emphasis on the second chart that we're looking at for that Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse. With that with the moon, Venus, sun opposition, I think there tends to indicate increased appetites and a desire to overindulge. And, with a T square to Mars, it also indicates added emotionalism, a bit of hastiness and needless disputes. However, sometimes even when something doesn't come out perfect, something that needs to be said, sometimes clearing the air with a willingness to align for shared goals can really help reset the course.
Exactly. Well, and just reevaluating, what our desires, our wants, because in January, what they were, it's very likely a lot of people have had changes. It might be to move in the country. It might be to move closer to where they have other family. It might be, I want a smaller house, or I want a bigger house and I want to rent out 3 rooms. I want to have a 4-bedroom house and I'll rent out 3 of the rooms because I'll have companionship. There's all kinds of reevaluating going on.
And they don't realize what they just locked themselves into.
Or pets.
Yeah, well, pets are being adopted like crazy because usually down the street I have a shelter, and usually they have a lot of cats this time of year, and the last 2 or 3 times that I've driven by there, they've had 1 cat. That's it. But no, the animal adoption centers in my area here, they're just being adopted out left and right. Well, people are at home.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of shifting that. So that's a good thing. That's a positive manifestation. So
as long as they know what they're getting themselves into.
Well, nobody. That is really the task of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
But going forward, that's all we can do.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking too, the streets are opening up, like in the cities. I don't know if other cities are doing this, but in Seattle, they're opening up a lot of streets to pedestrians and cyclists. So it's really reframing our environment. And that's really the next step here with the Gemini energy that, with the North Node that we're going towards. It's like one indication of it, because people need to walk more and they need to have social distancing. And I think that's the biggest part about this. How do we incorporate this idea of social distancing with our interactions? It's going to have, this summer will be quite a tracking it, and that's one of the ideas is, open up the streets or.
Yeah, and kind of keeping another message of Venus and with Venus retrograde can be keeping things within a budget too, because there's, considerations. A lot of things could be pulling on us to buy, or, something that just seems like, oh, I got to have it. And you may be living with the ramifications of that for 19 months, because that's kind of the length of the reverberation of this eclipse too.
Yes, resources. It's so true. And resources in many ways. It might, resources could be our talents, and it can be all that. So yes, of course. And it's perhaps a good time to start a singing. I guess you could sing even on Zoom. We could get together and have a little choir or something, or sing rap or rock songs or whatever you like, or choral music or whatever one's interested. I've never been, it's not particularly my thought, but oh boy, here we are. Well, we have about half a minute when we get that little reminder, and there are so many changes and these missed opportunities wanting to connect. I was just noticing some of this, but communication and laughter, isn't that great? Number 3, I think that's a good place to go. In the meantime, remember that we are kind of like going in our little spaceship, aren't we? With this xenon that you mentioned, Sarah. So
Yeah.
I think we'll just have to keep working mightily, because at the end of the month we're going from one of our reflecting deeply with what values we have to really our thinking of our emotions, because it'll be with Gemini.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.